Hello there, my name's Christian Henson. I'm a nerd, and welcome to Nerding for the Weekend. I thought that would make a good drinking game, or an effective one anyway, that you basically put on some kind of talk radio station, like in this country, Radio 5 or LBC, and basically every time you hear the word coronavirus, you have a shot of beer. And every time you hear the word COVID, you have a shot of tequila. And every time you hear COVID-19, you have to wash your hands. I'm sure it would make for a very jolly night. Anyway, trying to get away from that, for us to escape into nerdery, into our shed-like existence. So what have you been up to? Hildeman returns with a video entitled "Idiot with Messy Hair Confusedly Talking to Camera at 1 a.m. I'm in. Whoever Case is, stop it. Brian Wells last week spent the week doing some orchestral experiments, which he shared with us. And, sorry, Mitchell Benham, I totally missed you last week. You've done this fascinating film about revisiting a score that you made some years ago. All of these linked below, alongside a link to Paul Thompson's vlog. If you've not subscribed to his channel, please do. He's putting up a film today, a behind-the-scenes thing of a project he's been involved with, which is totally bonkers and totally throws Jake under the truck again. Paul is also going to be joining us to talk about it next week. But remember, hashtag nerding for the weekend. Pray tell us what you've been up to during lockdown and anything you can occupy our time with. Myself? Well, you know how we looked at Jaws last week? Well, I thought I'd make a cue sheet. And I've really gone deep, like all of the source music, the marching band music, the stuff on the beach, the time that Quint whistles and sings Spanish Ladies. And then I thought, well, I might as well, whilst I'm at it, kind of note some notable moments. And then, well, how many deaths are there? Are there 5 or just 4? I feel that 1 is uncorroborated, so it's a bit of a hot issue. And then I thought, well, it'd be interesting to know how many times we actually see the shark. I thought it was maybe just a half a dozen times. Turns out the shark appears in one shape or form, whether it be a model or some stock footage, 102 times. And then I thought, well, it would be nice to get a still image for every single one of these cells. So Paul Kellen's been hard at work. Do subscribe to this channel, if nothing else, but to know when to avoid a truly deep, nerdiest Maximus dive into Jaws, coming to a small telescreen near you soon, which is proof enough, I think, of why I should never really be left too long alone in my shed. So it's my very great honour to be joined this week by someone who I really admire. He's a fantastic composer, an amazing samplist, but also an amazingly inventive samplist with one of my favourite YouTube channels, Mr. Dave Hilowitz.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I have an anaphylactic reaction when people refer to me as Chris. So is Dave tolerated, preferred, or does your tongue swell up?
Yeah, Dave is absolutely preferred. Like, David is the official, the channel name. But yeah, in real life, it's Dave.
Okay, so you don't like Dave because that's when people are cross at you.
Yeah, exactly.
So last week we were joined by Dan Keane, who lived somewhere famous for someone really famous who lived there. And you're not to be outdone because I guess he's slightly less of a passive figure than Winnie the Pooh, but you live somewhere that someone very famous comes from. Famous flight of stairs.
Oh, the Rocky Stairs, certainly. I thought you were going to talk about Will Smith.
I didn't know he was from Philadelphia.
West Philadelphia, right where I am. Yeah.
Are you from Philadelphia originally?
I'm from Boston originally, but also I grew up partly in Switzerland. So yeah, interesting backstory there.
So how has lockdown been for you? I know that you have a young child. Have you managed to get any work done?
Some 2 to 3 hours a day, something like that. It's brutal. I like you, I've kind of started doing a morning routine. I get up at 6 a.m. every morning and I write, music for maybe an hour and a half before the rest of the family gets up. That's how I've adjusted, I guess, to quarantine. So yeah, been writing a lot of music lately. Not something I planned on, but it's some sort of emotional reaction to being at home so much.
I'm really pleased to hear that, because what I've been hearing kind of on the grapevine, social media, this, that and the other is actually people really struggling with that. And I feel that I'm okay with the sampling and the kind of nancing around with my like modular synths and stuff like that. But I have found the writing more difficult. But you've found it's been an inspiration is probably the wrong word, but there's...
Well, I think in terms of like the loss of time, it's funny because we're all having the same experience, but we're all having different experiences. Some people say, oh, I have so much time on my hands, I kind of don't know what to do with it. And for me, it's kind of the opposite because my son is home all the time. So basically, the only other period of my life that's similar to that is when he was born, like right when he was born. And, we weren't getting any sleep. He wasn't getting any sleep. And I, to the extent that I needed to do something creative and feel like, okay, I'm still a person who writes music. I'm still somebody who like is in that world. I would write these like little short film cues, these just like little pieces of library music that were like a minute long. And, maybe I would write a chord progression one day and the next day I would write like a little lead part and that would be the whole thing.
I feel that composers fall into two clear camps. Those who compose music with sounds that they curate and gather and put together, and those who compose with sounds that they make. And you are very much someone who makes sounds. When did you get bitten by that bug?
Probably as a kid, messing around with tape recorder. Probably as a kid. My first digital sample that I ever did was probably like 2002, 2003, something like that. Messing around with like the old sound font format. Making some pretty heinous samples. Briefly, I worked actually for a sampling company in 2002, 2003, which, I was like still in school.
Right.
And it was basically an internship. Eventually they went belly up. But I loved doing it. I actually loved making it. I actually never stopped. It was only like about 3 years ago, something like that, where I kind of like started thinking about it like, oh, well, I actually have this body of knowledge. I've been doing this forever. And I should kind of share it with people because it's not, it took me years to kind of get there. And a lot of the things are things I wish I'd been told like immediately. Like they're not that complicated. They can be explained pretty easily, but like there just wasn't that much in the way of like educational materials for it. So that's kind of like where the basis of the original YouTube channel came from.
I'm basically learning by proxy from your videos about, because I'm considering I have quite a big company that makes contact libraries. I didn't start programming anything until about a year ago, and I've been very, very much following your YouTube. You seem to have an innate, or have developed an innate understanding of the importance of character within libraries.
For me, part of the magic of other people's samples, and the reason that I like them, is that like when I'm working and I'm writing, little piano pieces or whatever library music, I might write something that I really like and I'm really proud of, and then a little time will pass and I'll write another thing, and it'll be not a carbon copy of the original thing, but it'll be a little bit different, and not so much different that I feel like, I think everybody has that to some extent, where like you look at something you just wrote and you're like, well, that's really just like this other thing that I wrote. And what I like about samples is they can kind of inspire you to go in a different direction. The reason that character is so important is you can kind of like get that magic, like you hear what's coming from the speakers and you're like, that surprised me. And yes. If it surprises you, it doesn't necessarily have to sound, exactly like you would expect a violin sample to sound or something like that. It has to sound unique and different. That's kind of what I'm trying to do with the samples. So I'm trying to kind of provide people with a little difference that will allow them to kind of feel that inspiration.
For me, it's like just basically inserting performance at a different point in the workflow. So it used to be composition, performance, record, and post-production. And now it can be performance, composition, and post-production. It just reminds me sometimes of being in a room with a musician going, it's a G and then it's an A, and they naturally interpret those things differently, but it's still your composition.
When you use the samples as a starting point, you've automatically kind of got this other foundation to build on. That's it's a completely different experience. It's not composing in the traditional sense. It's composing in a kind of like additive audio sense. You're hearing exactly what the performance is already going to sound like.
Is there anything that we can look forward to that you're working on at the moment?
Basically, like one of the things about lockdown is that all of the instruments that have been like gathering dust that I really should have sampled years ago, they're they're getting sampled, obviously. So, mandolins, weird zithers. I went through a zither phase. I don't know if that's something that other people have done, but I bought like 6 of them.
You're a child of the Cold War.
But yeah, I've got like in the basement, I've got like 6 zithers, and I'm just like, what should I do with the zithers? I'm trying to like think of some clever way of sampling them. Also, while I was in London, I built 2 violins. I think it was kind of like a nesting instinct, when you're in a new place and you try to like make it feel like home or something like that. That was my nesting instinct, was to like build instruments there. Hold on.
Wow.
So I can show you the specimen. This is the second one I built. I built 2 of them. The second one, I love it. I love the way it sounds. And one of these days I'm going to make like a full library. Right now I just recorded this week box violin swells, I'm calling it. One of the things I'm working on right now is I'm scoring a feature, and I've used it just like in every cue. I don't know why. I didn't expect to use it at all, but it always finds a way in.
Any kind of interesting YouTubes coming up?
The YouTube channel's always been split between 2 things. It's like 50% contact tutorials and, some Ableton tutorials also, and then 50% just like the weird experiments that I happen to be doing. Got a couple contact tutorials coming up. Angus Roberts-Carey put together a piano book template. Basically, it's like a contact boilerplate. Basically, it's just showing off how you can use that template and like swap out effects and add round robins and that kind of stuff that I think that will be useful to anyone, piano bookers, non-piano bookers, anybody who wants to make a contact instrument.
So please do head along to Dave's YouTube channel, linked below. And it's really important, if you do use these resources, tutorials or whatever it is that you're watching regularly on YouTube channels, do subscribe to YouTube creators' channels, because subscriptions, views and likes are the currency of what we do. And there's all sorts of benefits that come our way if you get subscriptions above a certain level. So the way that you pay people back is through subscriptions. So I really do plead you to do that. Dave, do you mind hanging around and talking about some other things that we're talking about?
I'd love to. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, Dave's been talking about Piano Book, and this is the moment you've been waiting for. And I have to apologise, last week, so rude. I wanted to kind of really get through the instruments quickly, and I failed to mention any of your names, so apologies for the contributors to last week's free downloads from pianobook.co.uk, starting with Caelan Smith's Little Organ, which is perfectly imperfect. It's got 2 different sounds. So we've got the airgan, there's kind of an airy thing, and then the little organ. It has a kind of aching beauty to it. Now, what does it sound like with both? And just a little bit of splosh. Now, whilst Keith may not be the most prolific contributor to Piano Book with instruments, he very possibly may be with demos, so check some of those out. But he's also developed this penchant for sampling things that don't probably sound very nice and making them sound wonderful, not least with this blender. Excited about this one. I went to a really rough comprehensive school and I refused to conform. And by conform, it wasn't like conform swatting up the teachers. It was just like I refused to become a wide boy. So I retained quite this kind of posh accent that our mother had grafted onto us. I used to walk down the corridors with a pair of, they looked like the kind of trousers Rupert the Bear would wear. And I had my sleeked back ginger hair and a pair of patent leather shoes. And I used to walk down the corridors playing my recorder very loudly. I don't know why I had the shit kicked out of me repeatedly. Not that I condone bullying. It was pretty horrible, but didn't conform. So recorder choirs rule, in my humble opinion. I'll take the reverb off at first and then just have a listen to this. I have a sense this is going to be really useful. I think it's always quite good to attach at least expression to... A little bit of reverb, though. I wonder if we can actually really make that mellotronic by... I don't know if anyone wants to have a go at turning those samples into a more mellotronic sound. That's part of the whole piano book thing, is people upload samples and other people then fuck around with them and do different stuff. Skimmer's next up. Anders Wall, who also creates a lot of stuff for piano book. Now, I believe this is you taking an EBow to a large bass, and this is just absolutely awesome. Lovely. Next up, we've got some lovely bamboo created by and Mod Wheel adds space. Ooh, doesn't it? You don't mind, I'm just going to have a quick go on something, because I've been listening to that Tom York album, Anima, and I just love his out-of-tune synths on it. I'm very much in the mood for creating that kind of spirit. I think it's absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful. Really, really, I'm going to definitely use that with the filter down and that spreader to just make it sound like a slightly dysfunctional synth. Now, sure, you would have seen Dan Keane talk about the isolation collaboration. I want to spend a bit more time on this because it is a really insanely sensitive, beautiful instrument that he has created. And again, for me, part of this whole argument about composers making sounds and how they tend to be so much more inspiring than when, say, tech companies do. So let's just have a very quick play of this and see what Dan's been up to. To be returned to. So do subscribe to this channel if you want to find out more about this, but also check it out on pianobook.co.uk. Everything I've previewed today is linked below. I'm sure you agree, Dave, some fascinating instruments in this week's Piano Drop, not least Dan's amazing kind of isolation instrument. I'm sure you're looking forward to getting your hands on that. Are there any instruments other than your own that you've enjoyed working with from Piano Book?
Yeah, a lot of things. I really like the soft string spurs library. Yes. I use that constantly. It's a little like I almost don't know which of the piano libraries to pick because I basically just shop around. Like one of the things that I'll do when I'm starting a piece that has piano is I'll try to find a new one to play with every single time to kind of like just get my feet wet with it, see what I think of it. What else? I actually made a list of ones that I like. Oh, I really like the Subtle Clarinet library. Yes. It came out something like 2 months ago, something like that. It's great. There's John Mayer's flute and violin library. Love that. And some of the like oddball ones, like Marco Iannello's Sounds from the Kitchen library. Yeah, I downloaded it, didn't really know how I was going to use it, and then I ended up using it in a queue, like the following week. It was just exactly what I needed. So yeah, it's funny how like you find these little instruments that are just like the perfect spice to add to something. It's been such an unexpected surprise, this project, and I'm really proud to be a part of the community. I hope you're giving so much, I hope you're getting back as well. Oh, I'm on the site like every day, just like, pulling down things, trying to figure out what I'm going to build into a queue, basically.
That is brilliant news. Do you have that handful of tracks or pieces of music that you remember to this day where you were, who you were with, and what you were doing when you heard them for the first time. I think I have about 6, and this is one of them. Arvo Pärt Fratras. I was in, it would have been 12 years ago, East Dulwich. I was living in East Dulwich, and I had the proms on, and the reason I had my radio on is because I was heating something up in my oven, and the oven took too much power from the circuit, so I couldn't watch TV whilst I had the oven on. And suddenly, this trombone started playing. I mean, what the actual? Which got my attention, but then it suddenly shifted into something that was just simply sublime. And I'd heard of his name. I thought it was pronounced Arvo Pärt. Turns out Arvo Pärt. And immediately went on a full-on investigation. And the thing I immediately found was I was spoilt for choice, not just for music that he'd written, but simply for versions of his Fratras. The more commonly known one is the one that features the insane stuff you heard on the trombone, but played on a violin. But for me, it was the chordal elements that captured me. Not knowing anything about Arvo Pärt, I got a sense that this for me felt like music that wasn't celestial, but actually came up through the earth. There was very much the sense of the ground. And I've since found out that actually he's all about that. Massive God-botherer. But interestingly, his surrounding environment, that of Estonia, is very much the source of inspiration for him. So that connection was correct. And I did in fact visit Estonia one time to see where he had come from, to experience the spirit of those forests, which are quite extraordinary. On further inspection, Arvo Pärt used to be kind of an avant-garde composer, and he was really shit. It's some of the most average avant-garde atonal music I've ever come across. But around the mid-1970s, whilst Steve Reich and Philip Glass were fiddling around with marimbas and vibraphones, he developed this tintin bully. He's a Tintin bully. It is truly systems music. It's all about sustains and triads and things moving diatonically in cogs. And as you can tell, I don't really understand it at all. And I think it's interesting because Steve Reich and Philip Glass are often referred to as minimalists. But actually, when you see their music, certainly Steve Reich's, it's far from minimal. There's loads of notes going on, and it can be quite kind of vaudeville, quite fun to watch. They are definitely systems composers, and I think that I would group them together with Arvo Pärt. But I would say Arvo Pärt is the ultimate minimalist. So, Dave, are you familiar with Arvo Pärt's work at all? Are you a fan? Or
only through like retrospectives and like kind of like, you know, best ofs, like these are the pieces you should listen to, kind of like playlists and things. So I've listened to a lot of that stuff, but you know, I haven't done a deep dive. I listened to it, you know, like a couple different versions on Spotify, and then I watched a YouTube video where you could see the score as well. As a lapsed violinist, it gave me heart palpitations. The first section, I was just like
the ricochet.
Yeah. I was just like, I'm really glad it's not me playing this.
And am I right in saying that is a ricochet maneuver? You basically form a chord and then it's
exactly.
How does that work?
So your fingers form basically like a chord. It's almost like a double stop, but I think it's probably on all 4 strings. And essentially you're bouncing the bow. I've got a bow here. You're bouncing the bow like that. Across the bridge, so hit the G string, hit the D string, hit the A string, but so fast. And then my favorite part of that is when after the ricochet ends, and then it's suddenly so staid, so placid, and I just feel like it's like getting off of a moving train. You know, if you don't know that it's coming, you have to have your legs kind of like pumping already and try to match the speed of the train. Otherwise, you're just gonna like.
Fratras is something I'm going to return to in my series Modular Monday, because I would like to experiment with my modular system, my Frankensynth, being a Tintin bully, Tintam. So subscribe for a modular version of Fratras coming to a bleep bloop near you soon. Right. This week's film, something my wife introduced to me, and is part of Alan J. Pakula's Paranoid trilogy, a very specific form of paranoid thrillers that come out of the depths of the Cold War era. The Parallax View, starring Warren Beatty sporting a very dirty pair of jeans. Clute and All the President's Men. It's interesting being aware that Pakula directed All the President's Men, which is a sublime film, by the way. I think the Parallax View lures you into thinking that you're going to watch something else. It just keeps on batting at you from the left field. So, Dave, the Parallax View, it's something you've seen before?
No. I love this genre of movie, though, because I kind of grew up with it, because my grandmother was like an importer-exporter of films. It's a whole other story. But a lot of the films that she owned the rights to in the 70s were this kind of movie, like the ones that were, how do I say this, decent films, were like basically like knockoffs of this kind of movie. So I grew up with these, sepia tones, these colors, these sort of like depressing 70s film stock, and it's paranoia.
Yeah, that is the key of that era. And, I wouldn't have really been conscious. I was born in 71, so I wouldn't have been conscious in 75, 76. But certainly towards the end of the 70s and into the 80s, that I lived through that deep sense of paranoia caused by the Cold War and the air raid sirens going off to, practice what would happen if the bombs were flying over and all of this kind of stuff. So it's extraordinary to go back into that kind of film with that deep sense of paranoia that fitted the time. I think what I find fascinating about that genre is it just really doesn't exist anymore, certainly not in film. And I don't know, it went all the way through into the 80s. And for me, what I found quite interesting about watching it is it requires a huge amount of attention. And I don't know if we have that amount of attention anymore.
They don't make movies like this at all anymore, especially the last 20 minutes of it, where there's just like a lot of people in the shadows. You're just getting like little glimpses of people in very dark spaces, and you're trying to figure out, okay, is that Frady? Is that somebody from the Parallax Corporation? Is that somebody? Is that a police officer? Like trying to figure out exactly what's happening. And I mean, I can't say that I actually came to any conclusions. Actually, the last 10 minutes are definitely very.
Well, that's what. I guess that's when they say you're gripping your seat is basically what I find with modern movies, and I think it was really obvious when I saw the Da Vinci Code, which I guess is a thriller, and it's like it's putting the pieces of a jigsaw together, is they explained everything so everyone was up with the plot. And I think what's fascinating about this genre of these 70s thrillers is you really don't know what's going on. And that in itself is very anxiety-inducing.
The last movie that I remember seeing that had that feeling to it was, do you remember Syriana?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
It was like maybe 12 years ago, I think, something like that. I've completely lost track of time. It could have been like 5 minutes ago. I think it was 12 years ago.
I think it was my father was in it, believe it or not. He's an actor.
So that had that very open-ended feel to it. It was like sort of like a lot of different vignettes. There was a guy who was kind of like embedded with some oil company somewhere, and is a pretty brutal film in a way. And at the end of it, I kind of wasn't sure what to make of it, and I was just like, okay, was I just given a jigsaw puzzle that isn't solvable? Was there a way to solve it? Is there an interpretation that was like, this? I felt Parallax View. I felt like, so at the very end, I wasn't sure whether or not, because right before the final scene, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if the Parallax Corporation successfully programmed him into being a killer? Like if he's like the whole time he was like on the hunt for like, who's behind this, and he watches the test film, of course. And, and that test film scene is so amazing. He like sits in that chair, which looks exactly like an electric chair, obviously. And, which, not obviously an accident. And, what if he is actually the personality type of somebody who can be kind of programmed into being a killer? If you expose them to the right kind of messaging, that would be kind of an intriguing ending. And I mean, I don't think that's what the movie's trying to say. I think he's kind of like supposed to be kind of framed, but I'm not sure. And there's like a little part of me that's like, well, wait, maybe the commission is right. Maybe that when, because I feel like the last scene is, we see this judicial commission, and they're, delivering their proclamation that, he acted alone, and that was that. And we know he didn't act alone, obviously. We know about the Parallax Corporation. But, I mean, maybe he did actually pull the trigger. We don't know. We didn't see who pulled the trigger. So yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
And that's what I miss about this era of films. I mean, we're all the way up to something like Jagged Edge or No Way Out, which were right into the 80s and early 90s and stuff. Pelican Brief, which I believe this composer did the music for that as well. But I think that what I love is a film where you actually have to think about it afterwards and put stuff back together. The thing that I found fascinating, and again, very much, it made you really want to watch the end, is it started by suggesting, and particularly when you know it's been directed by the same guy who did All the President's Men, you think this is going to be a political conspiracy. We're going to find out about these senators and what's going on here. And the second act, you suddenly realise it's not about that. It's possibly about all of these people are being killed who are around the senators. And then there's this wonderful moment where you go, it's about him. And I think that, how about when the boat exploded? I think that's the biggest I've jumped for a film in a long time.
Yeah, and it's owing partly to the soundtrack, because the soundtrack is so interesting, because it's like, for starters, there's so much silence. There's a lot of silence. And then there's this cue that just keeps coming back. Like, a lot of the cues are basically the same cue that have just been like reworked a little bit. And it's like, it always starts the same way. It's like this kind of 70s ominous thing. There's like maybe a tape organ, something droney at the low end, and then I can't quite pick out what the instrumentation is, and it's perfect. It's like exactly what you would hope for in this kind of movie. It's like 70s, and then it gets like majestic, like it gets like kind of like and I was like, boy, it's funny because I the first half of it I liked every time, and the second half of it I was just like, this is so misplaced. Like, why is there like a French horn coming out of nowhere, and it's major, and it's like a little uplifting, and then
patriotic almost.
Boom. Yeah, it's patriotic, right? And I was thinking about it. I was like, how am I going to describe to Christian what I hate about this stupid, theme? And then I was thinking, and I was like, well, what I would picture going along with that is like an American flag, billowing in the wind, and, a bald eagle flying, it just seems like that. And then I was like, well, that imagery is in the movie. It's a movie that's about patriotism. It's kind of like this perverted kind of patriotism. And to some extent, the message of the movie is like that, political assassination is a central part of American politics, which is a weird message to receive in 2020. I think it probably resonated a lot more in 1974
Absolutely.
Than it does now.
Yes. I mean, you have that. One of the most famous things that people don't talk about these days is, I don't know if you're aware of Sonny, as in Sonny and Cher. He was was he a senator or a governor, something like that? And he was politically assassinated. And the favoured method in those days was skiing accidents. But I'm totally with you on the music. I found the music... sometimes you watch those older films. I think a great example is like Once Upon a Time in America with the Ennio Morricone score, where you get this theme, and the theme just goes off in its own direction compared to where the film's going. And I just thought, it's just a 70s thing. But what I really enjoyed, and it started really getting under my skin, was, for me, it felt like recruitment music. Yeah.
And I think so early on when this patriotic theme started showing up, I was like, this is just like, this film composer just didn't have access to the footage when they scored it. It just felt like completely blind scoring or something. Something weird is happening. And then I started thinking more about it, and I was like, okay, well, the music is being patriotic. The film is showing us like somebody lying dead on like the table in a morgue or something. And it's playing this kind of patriotic music. Maybe that's not an accident, maybe that's actually like, jarring but clever. So I kind of came around on it. I still don't know if it worked aesthetically, but like in terms of like a conceptual choice, I kind of get it now. So.
And I'm with you on, I loved it almost reminded me of the technique that Jerry Goldsmith uses a lot, which is, I think it's like an augmented seventh or something like that. And all of those notes were great. And of course, there's the big montage scene, which I suspect I counted there were 14 cues if you include the montage scene, which I think is, and a great little early hybrid piece of chase music. But the montage, my father told me, because my father just fed me these mid 1970s kind of paranoid thrillers, and he always had to explain to me that basically during the kind of early mid to late 70s they always had to put, or rather films would be more successful if they put a slightly psychedelic piece in the middle, and apparently it was to satisfy people going to the late shows who were really stoned. So you always give the stoners a little bit of something to really freak them out and kind of warp their minds with. So I don't know if you agree. It felt like it went on a little bit. Like we get the message. He was shown a video.
Yeah, I was so surprised by the turn that it took. Like at first I was like, oh, it's some dumb Americana thing, and it was very cheesy, like obviously intentionally cheesy. And then you're like, okay, it gets darker. I get it. And then it turns into like kind of like Pink Floyd, kind of like early 70s Pink Floyd. Like there's definitely like a psychedelic element there. And I was just kind of like, I came around on it. I was like, okay, the imagery I didn't care for,
no.
But the music, I was like, I could listen to this again. I'm a big psych rock fan.
I think that what's interesting, I mean, there's a natural parallel I draw is a similar sequence in Kubrick's Clockwork Orange, but something that Kubrick does in that sequence is very much return back to Anthony Dowell and the impact that it's having on him. And we just don't see any of that. Basically, we are force-fed the video. We don't see how that impacts on Joseph's character at all. It's almost, we're asking to question, are we psychopaths? How do we feel? But we're not shown. It's almost, and I think it supports your idea of maybe it's not so clear-cut at the end, because really the whodunit, well, it's not stated at that point. We do not know how that video's affected him. It just cuts straight away to a shift in time.
Right, and it's the way they've obviously tricked him, or tricked any suspect or person that they're like bringing into the test room, is they say, oh, we're going to be monitoring you, but it's not clear that he's ever being monitored. So it's
Except for one shot. There's one shot that I think is very unusual. It's him on the kiddie train. And I don't know if you noticed, there's a very wide shot. And it's very rare, actually, for them on those kind of wide shots to use the audio from that actual moment. They'll usually cut the audio in from the close. So it's clear they were obviously on lav mics, and the machine they were recording to was probably in the cart with them. But what was interesting is they held on that shot really as the train went off into the distance and then was obscured by a bush, and it gave you a real sense of surveillance at that point.
Yeah, and I guess presumably the reason they're supposed to be there is because there's so much background noise.
Absolutely.
But it's I love that scene. I want to ride on that train. I was that was one of my favorite scenes in the whole film. And then basically goes into the tunnel, and then he's in, what is it, Salmon Tail or whatever the name of that horrible place is.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, which I looked up. It's made up.
Is it made up? Okay, because I don't particularly.
They weren't maligning some poor place.
Well, yeah, because they really don't stop fights in Salmon Tail, do they? Even though like thousands of dollars worth of damage is being caused.
Yeah. And the other thing is that there's a gift shop. There's a gift shop in that little bar, just for comedic value, just so that you can have like an old couple almost get trampled.
And the other thing, I'd like to know is, could you ever literally walk onto a runway and onto a plane and buy a plane ticket like a bus ticket?
Oh, that was amazing. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it when he was buying a ticket in cash from, directly on the plane. And also, how wide were the aisles? I mean, it was just having, I mean, there was a bomb on the plane, which is like, it's bad service, but like, the aisles are so wide that, who cares?
I love the device of the serviettes as well. It's just so simple, but And because he let it go on for so long, you knowing there's a bomb on the plane, I just thought it was great. A great device. Yeah. Have you seen any of other Pakula's films at all? All President's Men?
I saw All the President's Men.
Yeah.
I don't remember it. I mean, I know the basic plot.
Yeah.
But it's been ages. Yeah. But this was. I feel like I'm going to have to seek some more out because this was great.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and I think that something we haven't touched on is I did really enjoy the aesthetic. Something I really suspect is the courthouse at the beginning, at the end. I think is probably constructed within the conference centre where the climax was. There's something about the acoustic that's massive, and also they get that really wide shot, and you can't see the surrounding areas. So but I thought the aesthetic was quite stunning, and all of the amazing kind of high contrast stuff of that end scene and stuff.
My favorite audio moment in the whole film was when he's wandering around that conference center and you can hear the drum line. And you don't even know that there's actually a marching band yet.
Because it comes straight out of the cue, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. You just hear this kind of tick, 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 the snare drum. And it's brilliant. It's just a brilliant. And then also there's a flash where you see a cheerleader. And you've already been shown a cheerleader once before in the film, in the test film. And that was one of the images that kept reappearing. And in fact, it was one of the most inexplicable images. During the test film, when it got dark, it would be, one dark thing after another, and then cheerleader, then a dark thing, cheerleader. And every time it would show the cheerleader, I'd be like, it's not that ominous to show me a cheerleader. Okay, fine, I don't like organized sporting events that much, but it's not.
So a bit of neuro-linguistic programming. So I have a question. What do you think was the sousaphone? Was he just a bad dep, or was he part of the Parallax Corporation? Was it a sousaphone he was playing? Just a marching tuba.
Yeah, I thought it was a sousaphone. Yeah, I don't know, and it's weird because it's at one point somebody has to keep pointing out you should keep playing your instrument. There's a moment where he's kind of he's labeled by the film as being out of sorts. He's maybe not. He's a fill-in musician. He's not somebody who's regularly there. So I think probably the way that the film wants you to actually interpret the events at the end is not my reading. It's probably that he got framed. And this is the guy who's going to help frame him by saying, I see him at the right moment. And then somebody will be able to rush up there and shoot him. But that's my interpretation, but who knows?
Yes. Because he could play. He definitely was playing later on.
It's hard to find, a spy who can also play the sousaphone.
Exactly. So a little bit of cash, a little bit of brown paper envelope. Dave, thanks for watching that, and so glad that you enjoyed it. I was with you on the first cue. I thought, God, have I remembered this film wrong? Is it awful? But I think it's very much of the era, and as we've demonstrated, we've left a lot of questions open. So, what do you think? Do you think the sousaphone player was a plant, or was there a rifle hidden in the horn of his instrument? Did Warren Beatty kill his character Joseph kill the senator? And do you think he made it out alive at the end? Would be fascinated to see what you think in the comments down below. Well, Dave, listen, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Thanks again for all of your contributions to Piano Book, to the world of YouTube, and thanks for giving up so much of your precious quarantined time today.
Oh, I mean, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, I've been watching your channel for forever. So it's nice to be a part of it.
No, it's brilliant. Thanks so much, Dave. See you soon. Next week, we'll be exploring The Conversation by Francis Ford Coppola. Yet another paranoid thriller, and something that he filmed in between Godfather 1 and 2, so he was on form. Linked below are the ways that you can access it from the UK and the US. It's really good for us in the UK at the moment because it's currently on BBC's free iPlayer. But there's also ways that you can access it in America for free, linked below. Please do join us and give us your thoughts down below. I would say of all the things we've watched so far, Conversation is, I think, the greatest film ever made for nerds, particularly of the audio persuasion. I'll also be listening to, and this is the way I describe it to a fantastic, very special guest that we've got appearing next week. It's like a stinky French cheese, like a époisse. Nice wouldn't be the word I would use to describe the taste. More challenging, but in a way that's kind of satisfying. So I'll be listening to Berrioz's Sinfonia. Not the whole thing, just movement 3. Arguably the world's Freudian, not worst, the world's first mashup. I'm so obsessed with this piece of music, a piece of music I've listened to more than any other. I really have investigated the different versions, and I would suggest that the version by the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra in Amsterdam, conducted by Richard Chailly, is the best one to go to, and that one is available on Spotify. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so and ding that bell to be notified the next time I'm putting a video up. Hopefully next week, in between episodes of Nerding for the Weekend, I'll be doing some more template fun with Jake, if I'm allowed to talk about that yet, and also that insane Jaws deep dive. But it would be so great to see you back here again next week, with you having watched the conversation by Francis Ford Coppola and maybe having your medicine of Berrioz's Sinfonia. Just the third movement, that's all you need to listen to. Thanks, as always, for watching, and thanks for contributing on hashtag Nerding for the Weekend, letting us know what you've been up to and providing us with additional distractions. One of those for David Hilowitz. Thanks so much for joining us this week, and thank you for staying the course. Subscribe, ding that bell. See you next week. Bye-bye.